We were sitting at our desks discussing an open case when the phone rang. Ed and I exchanged glances. He nodded and answered the call. It was our informant who told us that Mario Luciano was in the city. Mario was the person we had been looking for almost a year. We could have put him in jail for the murder of a local businessman, and a target was announced for him throughout the United States. This was the first time we had any clue about his whereabouts. Ed, my partner, and I talked it over and decided to stage a raid using an informant. If he can pull this off, the charge for possession of a kilogram of prohibited substances will be dropped. Ed called him back and told him the terms of the deal. He agreed and made contact. Luciano was staying at a Marriott downtown and trying to make local connections. The informant hinted that he has a source, a large one, who wants to expand in our market. Mario, as we hoped, bought into it, and we were hooked. Now that the hook was set, all that was left was to pull it out. Easy and neat. We set up a meeting with Marriott management and explained our plan to them. We assured them that there would be no shooting or danger to their guests. We emphasized that no one should know about our operation so as not to alert the target. Management agreed, and we began developing a plan. The next day, we returned to the Marriott and began preparations for the takeover. We called through an informant, asking Luciano to come down to meet people who could make him a lot of money. The informant insisted that the meeting should take place in a public place and not in a room. Since Luciano was involved in illegal substances, our informant came up with a story about a large supplier who was looking for a local distributor. Mario, as we hoped, bought it and said he'd be down soon. We were going to apprehend him peacefully as soon as he got off the elevator. We had information that, most likely, he would be unarmed, and we took this into account in our plan. We have blocked doors and stairways to keep traffic to a minimum. Although we didn't expect any problems, we wanted to play it safe. We took positions to the right of the elevators leading to the 20th floor. We verified that uniformed police were present but out of sight. They were standing to our left. There were 3 of them, ready to arrest the man we had come to pick up. The informant left, and we waited for our prey. He was due to come down any minute. Ed and I signaled to the uniformed officers to make sure they were ready. Now all that was left was to wait. We took up positions, our pistols in their holsters, with clasps undone, ready for action if necessary. We noticed how the arrow on the second elevator changed direction to down. Just a few more minutes, and he will be here. I signaled to the uniformed police and pointed to the arrow. They nodded in understanding. Neither of us thought to look in the direction of the restaurant, assuming it was closed for the afternoon break. We were experienced police officers and should not have assumed anything. But we did it. A man and a woman were walking towards the elevators from this direction, his arm wrapped around his companion. Her head was pressed against his shoulder, and he smiled at her. Lovers heading to their room. Ed nudged me to draw my attention to them just as the doors to the first elevator opened and they stepped inside. Without thinking, I went out into the area that was visible from the elevators when I recognized the woman. I found myself right in front of the elevator doors as they began to close. She looked at me, her eyes wide, her mouth open, as if she was trying to scream. She tried to reach the doors to stop them, but it was too late. The doors closed and the elevator began to rise. Ed swore, angry that I had foiled our plan, grabbed me, pushed me behind him, and motioned for the uniformed police to be ready to rush in when the second elevator opened. I was too stunned to say or do anything, and was still standing there when Ed screamed at me to move and everything went wrong. He and police arrested the man and took him into custody. I sat on a chair in the lobby while all this was happening and was still sitting there when Ed approached me. "Let's go, partner. I know it's hard, but you have to pull yourself together and do your job. Come on, I'll lead. We need to process it and send it to the cell while we have it. Did you see?" I couldn't say it out loud. I couldn't ask him this question. "Yes, buddy, I saw it. We're leaving here right now. You better not be here when she comes down, you know." Went. I stood up, followed him to the car, and sat quietly while he drove us back to the station. I had just witnessed something I never would have expected, and it blew my mind. I felt nauseous, my head was pounding, and my throat was tight with emotion. My world just collapsed without warning. On duty, I showed my badge to the policeman standing at the entrance and waited for him to step aside to let me through. It was a late call, coming in right before I was about to head home for the night. I was late finishing up some paperwork and, to my misfortune, was the one who answered the phone, which automatically made me the person in charge of the case. But I thought, maybe this is even better. I now live alone in a miserable room in a squalid neighborhood, so let the guys with their faithful wives and children go home. I'm not in that category anymore, so this was probably my ideal option. I called my partner Ed Prentice to tell him about the challenge, but told him to stay home with his wife and kids. I said I could handle it myself until tomorrow. I entered a small three-room apartment that was twice the size of mine and followed the trail of uniforms to the last room on the right. This was the bedroom of the poor fellow, who was now half lying on the floor, half on the bed. I went inside. The room remained empty until I showed up. I approached the body and began to look around. The position of the body, the furnishings, the blanket, everything that had to do with this person. This is what I did and what I knew how to do well, but even without any preparation you could immediately tell that this man was probably bleeding to death. "Hey, Cross, when can we pick up the body? I've been here for almost an hour. Why so long? Where is your shadow? Is he on vacation?" It was Harry Feeney, assistant medical examiner. He usually worked the same shift as me, and it looked like he got caught the same way I did. He had already done his job, trying not to touch the crime scene, and was now waiting for me. "Sorry, Harry. Today I'm alone. I was late at work and was already on the way out when this damn call came. It was such luck that no one else was there to answer. I'll just look around to see what happened. Time of death? Well, I take it you're saying he bled to death." "Yes, Pete. As far as I can tell, he's been dead for about 3 hours, give or take. And you're right. 2 shots, one in the chest, the other in the stomach. But the cause of death is blood loss from a wound in the stomach. This is obvious, but the final verdict is after the autopsy. Here's his wallet. The name is Sean Trent, and this is his apartment. 28 years old, single. No cash was found, and a watch and several rings were missing. There were marks on the wrists and fingers where they had been. Don't rush, I have nothing else to do anyway. Just tell me when you're done." I walked around the body, looking for something out of place, something that shouldn't be there, something unusual. I was about to give up when I noticed a small tag sticking out of his breast pocket. I pulled a pair of gloves from my pocket, small tweezers with a strong grip, and an evidence bag. I took the tag out of his pocket, examined it, and then placed it in a bag and sealed it. This will go with Harry's body and end up in the forensic department. After another 5 minutes, I was done. I left the room and told Harry that the body was his. I handed him the package and told him to add this to what he would find when he brought the body to the basement where he performed the autopsies. I approached Clancy, the uniformed policeman who seemed to be in charge, and told him to begin canvassing the apartments on this floor and the floors above and below. He said he had already started and the report would be on my desk in the morning. He had already called forensics, and they had just arrived as I was leaving. I told them I was handling the case and left, knowing that they would collect all the evidence and give me the list. I went back to the office and filled out several forms. Victim's name, time of death, cause of death, location, me as the lead on the case, Harry as the person in charge of the body, and many others to officially open the case with homicide. This was my place of work and what I did. My name is Peter Cross, and I have a gold badge. I am a detective first class assigned to the Homicide Division of the city of Plattsburgh, New York. I put the name of the murdered man on the board at the entrance to our office. This made it clear to everyone that I was in charge of the matter. Homicide occupied the top floor of a 3-story building that had once been a warehouse. Wooden floors, high ceilings with exposed beams, aluminum ducts that supplied heat in the winter and warm air in the summer. All the windows open so that we would not suffocate in the heat, but this could not be called comfort. This motivated the boys and girls not to stay here, but to work in the field. The patrol officers were located on the first floor. The special units and some of the authorities were on the second floor. I avoided this floor. I spent an hour on the computer, checking his name and everything I could find. My police access provided information about his finances and criminal record, but there was little useful information there. No arrest warrants, no pending charges, just a short list of previous arrests. A small petty thief, just as I suspected. No job registered in his name, no credit cards, no bank accounts. The apartment is rented for a week. The previous address is not indicated. The telephone is cheap prepaid. There was nothing valuable in the cabinets, and there were no signs of forced entry other than the missing wallet and watch. I'll see what a door-to-door search reveals and if the forensics team finds anything, but I expected this case to end up in the unsolved pile. I finished what I could, turned off the lights and computer, and headed home. Usually I walked up and down the 26 steps leading to the first floor, but today I took the freight elevator, which worked most of the time. The elevator took me down to the first floor, where the patrol officers were located, in just a minute and a half, twice as fast as walking. I was so tired that I just wanted to go back to the apartment and take a shower. Warm or cold, it doesn't matter. I got into the police sedan that I thought was my own and drove the short distance to the rented apartment where I lived. I walked up the short flight of stairs and entered my apartment. On the way, I checked the mail and found only a few advertising leaflets that did not interest me and one official document that I knew was from my lawyer. I was tempted to throw it all in the trash, but I stopped myself. I carefully placed the official document on the table and threw the rest in the trash. I went to the bathroom and took a shower, letting the warm water run down my aching shoulders and neck. I stayed in the shower as long as I could until the water started to cool. I dried myself off with the large fluffy towel I brought from home and walked into the only room that served as the living room, dining room, and kitchen. I sat down on the couch and tried to just stop thinking. After a few minutes of relative silence, I stood up with a heavy sigh and took the official envelope. I looked at it without much interest in what was inside, but eventually I summoned the strength to open it. I tore the edge, letting a piece fall to the floor, and took out the enclosed papers. I read the first page. It was a counterclaim from my wife. I flipped through the attached pages, noting the reasons her lawyer had listed, and chuckled. It was all nonsense, but what else would you expect? I threw the papers on the coffee table and stared into space, wondering what she had included there. What the hell did she mean? She accused me of abandoning my family. What nonsense was she talking about? And emotional cruelty. Come on. What was she thinking? She started it all. She cheated on me with that bastard Jeffrey Trousdale. It was he who tempted her to betray me. What did she expect me to do after that? Leaving family? Nonsense. I walked away from her betrayal. Emotional abuse. I hated her after what she did, and I told her so. Is this cruelty? No, it's just true. I sat for another 5 minutes, seething with anger, and my irritation perfectly dried the remaining drops of water on my wet hair. I told myself that I wanted nothing more than to end her life, but the more I thought about it, the angrier I became. I grabbed the phone and dialed her house number. Surely she is now with her lover, I thought when the phone started ringing. Where are the children at this time while she is doing this? She, of course, is a bitch for cheating on me, but I was sure that she would not do anything like that in front of the children. Although, damn it, I never thought that she would cheat on me either, so maybe I was wrong. I was about to hang up when she answered. She sounded excited. Hello? The voice was soft, but it sounded like she was out of breath, like she was running or doing something vigorous. I could guess what it was. My mind was already drawing pictures that made me sick. Pictures of her and that bastard. Hello, Carol. I just received your counterclaim from your corrupt lawyer. I'm surprised you didn't force your lover to make it up. Sounds like his style. I wanted to talk to you about this, but it seems that I interrupted your love session. You must have been fiddling with him for a long time if you're still out of breath. I hope the kids aren't around when you're cheating with another man. I was about to hang up, but she answered. Stop it, Peter. Stop it right now. I was in the garage trying to find the machine that controls the washer and dryer. They don't work, and I need to do laundry. My mother has the children, and I have no lover. You know it. No, Carol, I don't know. I know you're going to the Marriott with him. I saw you two together and saw you go up to the room. I saw you two hugging each other in the lobby while you were waiting for the elevator. The fact that you saw me there and immediately ran home doesn't change anything. Pete, no, you didn't even give me a chance to explain myself. It's not what you thought. Yes, I was with him, and yes, we were going to go up to his room, and I know it looked bad, but nothing happened. Nothing. Only because I was there, but if I hadn't been there, what would you do then? Nothing? I don't believe it. You were ready, I saw it. I've been married to you for 13 years, Carol, and I know what you look like when you're ready for it. Only it wouldn't be making love, right? It would just be sex. No, no, you don't believe it. You can't believe that I would do something like that. Yes, I was tempted and thought about it, but you can't believe that I would do it. I love you, Pete, and I love our family, and that would have stopped me. You have to believe it. I wouldn't do anything to him. Nothing. Sorry, Carol. I don't have the same faith in you that you suddenly have. This wasn't the first time you were with this creep. Obviously, you have met more than once, otherwise you would not be so close. He was used to allowing himself too much with you, that was obvious. Anyway, I called you to tell you that I will fight the counterclaim and make sure your lawyer choke on it. Pete, please, please come home so we can discuss everything. I made mistakes, but not as much as you think. I've never cheated on you. Never. You must let me explain myself and tell you what you saw. Please, Pete, come home. Think about the children. Sorry, Carol. It was you who didn't think about me or our children. You started this, and we will finish it. I won't be your doormat, and I damn sure won't share you with another man. But wait, were there other men? And in general, are our children from me? I have a lot of questions now, Carol, that I never thought I'd have to ask. I trusted you completely, but now I can't even trust you to tell me the truth. And what's worse is that I wasn't alone when I saw you. My partner and a bunch of uniforms also saw you two in that damn elevator hugging. Want to guess how many people know about you two now? Goodbye, Carol. I hung up, so angry I could barely breathe. I leaned forward, putting my head between my knees, and tried to calm myself. God, as a police officer, I should have known better than to lose control like that. But it was at work, and this is personal, and it hurts. Strongly. My breathing slowed, and the dizziness went away, but I was still completely exhausted and nauseous. It's good that I didn't eat dinner. However, I couldn't even remember the last time I ate. But it didn't matter, I still didn't want to eat. I have barely been able to keep food down since this happened. The next day I called Ed Prentice aside. Ed was my partner, but also my best friend. We went through the academy together, then we both served on patrol, and then we set ourselves the goal of becoming detectives. I got my badge first, and when Ed also became a detective, he became my partner. We had good crime-solving statistics, a couple of high-profile cases, and we were considered the best in the department. I wanted to talk to him alone. Listen, Ed, you know what I'm going through right now with Carol. I need information, and I needed it yesterday. I want the uniforms to press down on this bastard and have him crawl on his knees in front of me. I want him to understand that everything comes from me so that he feels this pressure. Of course, not in a way that he could prove anything. He knows what I need to know. Can you do this without it coming up on me? Say no more, partner. I'll do everything. Give me a couple of days, and he won't understand what's going on. He can't even go to the toilet without breaking some law. And know that ours are on your side. Nobody likes him, even among the guys. He's a smart lawyer, and everyone knows it. He was talking about the person Carol cheated on me with, Jeffrey L. Trousdale. He was one of the lawyers in her firm, and it was him who I found with her. At best, he was an ambulance chaser, but in reality, he was a scoundrel. We all hated him because he defended the worst of the worst. None of us were against a good lawyer who followed the rules, but Trousdale wasn't like that. And now, when he crossed my path, he messed with his most powerful enemy. And this enemy had many ways to pin him down. and he will soon understand this. Look, Pete, I know it's none of my business, but Helen talked to Carol, and I know for a fact that she regrets what she did. Helen believes that she simply made a huge mistake and regrets it greatly. You're right, Ed. It's none of your business. I don't have a problem with Helen and Carol interacting, but I don't care. Carol showed that she can lie, just like everyone else. So I can't trust what she tells me or Helen, and you should be careful what you hear. Ed blushed, accepting the criticism, remembering that my grief was still fresh. Wisely, he said nothing more. I went back to my case and reviewed the forensic reports. There was nothing there, but according to interviews with witnesses, several people saw someone named Willie Jude running from the apartment immediately after the loud noise. It seems our Willie has messed up big time. The tag I found in Sean's pocket at the crime scene contained part of the address of a building in the city's warehouse district that could be a clue. Since this was the only evidence we had, Ed and I got an arrest warrant and went looking for our guy. It took us almost the whole day, but we managed to get information that he was hiding in an empty building in the very part of the city where the indicated address was located. We called special forces and went to take him. After a short and futile struggle, Willie gave in, sobbing like a baby. We took him back to the station and put him in an interrogation room. We tossed a coin and Ed won. He took over the interrogation and easily split Willie. It turned out that there was a quarrel between him and Sean over a scam they were pulling. Sean embezzled a couple $100 and Willie found out about it. When he confronted Sean, he refused to give him the money back, so Willie pulled out a gun. A fight ensued and the weapon went off. Sean was still alive and screamed loudly, which greatly frightened Willie. Then he shot again to silence him. Taking all the money he found in Sean's wallet, as well as his fake Rolex and rings, Willie ran away and hid where we found him. As Ed recorded the confession, I took Willie to the cell and walked him through the processing process. They took his fingerprints, registered his belongings, and took some attractive photos for the case. After he was in the cell until the morning, I returned to my desk to complete the paperwork. For a case that I was going to file as a cold case, we got it done in less than 24 hours. Not bad. This should look good in our statistics. Such small murders always brought special pleasure when they were solved. The next morning, we held an identification parade and 3 witnesses confirmed that Willie was the same man they saw running from Sean's apartment. We had ironclad proof. While I was closing the case and removing materials from the board, Ed exited the freight elevator. Ed had weight problems and didn't do extra work if possible. When I walked, he rode the elevator. When I ran, he walked. While I was getting coffee, he was eating a donut, and so on. If the criminal escaped, Ed returned to the car and drove around the block to intercept him. And I was the one who ran after him until I was exhausted. He came and sat on the interrogation chair next to my table, crossing his legs and putting his hands behind his head. Just wanted to let you know that Mr. Trousdale had a very bad day. It appears his tail light was broken and the license plate sticker was illegible. He was issued a fine for both violations. And you won't believe it, he crossed the street at a red light, and one of our girls in uniform noticed it. I gave him a fine for jaywalking. It's automatically $50. I smiled and high-fived him. Ed grinned widely in response and said, "Give him 2 days at this pace. He'll be here on Friday to talk to you. What will you tell him?" "I don't know yet. I want to know the truth. I want him to tell me everything he knows about the 2 of them. One way or another, I will find out the truth. You may have to look away when I do this. You know, I have vision problems. It's time to see a doctor. Sometimes I don't see anything," he said and walked away, waving his hand and muttering something about a visit to the doctor. Now all I had to do was talk to Carol and listen to her version. I had a feeling that she would lie outright. The detective's instincts told me she wasn't being honest with me. She was afraid and tried to hide behind lies. I've seen this too often. Now it's time to pretend to be a lawyer and make her lie to me, but officially. After work, I remembered that Ed wanted to have a couple of beers, so I went to the bar where we usually spent our free time and spent the next 2 hours with colleagues. I treated the guys in uniform, and this slightly increased my reputation among them. There was talk that some cunning lawyer was in trouble and that the police should be on their guard. It seemed to me that Jeffrey had not had a very good day, and tomorrow did not bode well for him either. I called Carol in the evening and agreed to come home on Thursday evening to talk. She was on the edge, begging me not to wait and to come right now. She mentioned the kids again and said they missed me. I asked her if she told the kids why I wasn't home, and she burst into tears. She begged me not to tell them what she had done. I asked why I couldn't tell them that I had simply misunderstood an innocent situation. She cried and begged, and it became too hard for me to listen to. I was too tired to continue this conversation, so I just told her to wait for me and hung up. She didn't know where I was now, and I used the number blocking feature to prevent her from finding out my new number. I didn't answer my cell phone either, so she gave up trying. The next day at work, Ed sat down with me and told me the bad news about our murder case. The scumbag's lawyer filed a petition to challenge the confession. He says we forced him to speak under pressure. He claims that we intimidated him because we were armed. He states that we threatened to shoot him if he did not confess. It seems that if the confession is excluded, the case will fall apart. We need more evidence. Damn it! What do we have other than eyewitness testimony? Is there anything from the apartment? Prints? DNA? Nothing from the apartment, but in his confession he said where he threw away the weapon, and we have a bullet from the victim. We need to find this trunk. We should find him during a routine walk through. We can't use his words as a clue. Simply order patrol officers to begin a routine search of the area to look for any discarded items that may be related to the case. Don't mention weapons. You and I will join them. During his confession, Willie said he threw the gun in a dumpster on the way to his car. I knew the area well, and Ed and I arranged for the patrol to help and began a search. Ed and I took the containers that were closest to the scene and took turns diving into them. My favorite pastime is digging through trash. It was already about noon when one of the patrolmen called us and said that he had found the barrel. The weapon matched the one used, and we immediately sent it to the crime lab. We also ensured that the chain of evidence was followed. Then, having obtained a search warrant, we searched the criminal's apartment and found a box of ammunition consistent with the weapon, as well as a notebook with details of the scams that he and Sean were pulling off. We took all this, recorded it, and made detailed notes in our journals. Now, all that was left was to wait for the fingerprints and the ballistics report. It all came back around noon. The prints belonged to our suspect, and the bullets matched the one taken from the victim's body. It was in our pocket. Ed and I met with the lieutenant, and he contacted the DA. We presented all the evidence: weapons, fingerprints, ballistics report, notebook, and all other materials, including eyewitness statements and identification results. We had irrefutable evidence, and the prosecutor agreed. Willie will go on trial for at least first-degree murder. Meanwhile, my support group continued to make life difficult for Mr. Trousdale. It looks like his registration got lost in the system, and his car had no license plates. It could be assumed that it was stolen, he was told. When he checked it himself, he was furious there really were no numbers. He claimed that they had been there the day before, but the police officer just shrugged and issued a ticket for failure to properly register, suspicion of car theft, and resisting arrest. The car was confiscated and sent to the impound lot. Mr. Trousdale was furious, but everything that was in the protocol was confirmed by photographs. No license plates, no proof of ownership, and he was caught on camera with his fist raised as if he was threatening the officer. It was Thursday, and I could feel the pressure building on him. He was on the verge of exploding. I let Ed know that one word from me could stop this nightmare, but that it would be my word against his if he tried to blame me for initiating the police harassment. And if he does decide to file a complaint, who knows how things could get even worse for him. Ed grinned and said that the message had already been conveyed. I was off duty and ready to meet Carol. Ed and I stopped for a beer, and I told him what I was going to do. He wished me luck and sent me off to listen to the lies I expected Carol to tell me. I was almost sure that she would try to convince me that this was an isolated incident and that it was simply an error in her judgment, or that her boss was harassing her and she succumbed to his charms. Everything to convince me that she is not guilty of cheating. Now, a little about Carol. I met her 13 years ago at a Christmas party hosted by the district attorney's office for all the detectives and those of us who worked with the district attorney and not on the streets. We were the ones who worked closely with the prosecutor's office, and most of us knew all the lawyers working in the city. The party was good, and I was having a good time when I saw her. Red-haired, with long legs and noticeable curves, she immediately attracted my attention, and I could not take my eyes off her. Then I was alone, without a girlfriend and without obligations. I didn't meet anyone often, but this girl could change my mind. She was with another girl, a blonde, and they were standing in front of 4 or 5 guys who were clearly trying to flirt with them. I knew many of them, and most of them either had wives or girlfriends. I was watching, placing bets on who would get lucky when the redhead said something and the guys just disappeared. The two of them laughed at something she said. I continued to watch her, and at some point our eyes met. This was the beginning of a short but passionate romance. Carol worked as a secretary in the district attorney's office and was assigned to the general department. This meant that she helped those who needed to take on extra work on cases or hot trials. She was trained as a paralegal and wanted to work for a private attorney or a prestigious law firm. She was respected and loved by her colleagues. I also became attached to her, and it seems that it was mutual. We started dating, realized we had a lot in common, and soon became very serious about each other. We experimented with sex and realized that we were suitable for each other. She was open in her desires, as was I, and we easily found ways to satisfy each other. The love between us turned out to be stronger than anything we had ever experienced with other partners. We fell in love with each other, and this predetermined our destinies. I proposed to her over the Christmas holidays, and she accepted. We got married in June in a typical wedding with friends. Our families lived in other parts of the country, so after the wedding we were left alone. We honeymooned in Hawaii, like many newlyweds, and for the first week we barely left our room. In the second week, we still began to explore the islands, but frankly, we found each other much more interesting than everything else. When I returned home, I went back to work as a police officer, and Carol found a job at a law firm doing defense work. She loved her job and soon began putting her paralegal knowledge to good use. We decided to start a family soon after I received my detective badge, and a short time later we had Julia. Carol stayed at home with Julia for almost a year and then went back to work. Everything was the same until Julia was 2, and then we had Jimmy. Carol stayed home again for almost a year and then returned to work. This was 7 years ago. In all this time, I have not had a single reason to doubt my wife or our marriage. Carol was a loving wife and a wonderful mother, and I loved her as much as I did on our wedding day. I always trusted her to take care of our home and children while I was in the service. I did the same when she was late at work on some important matter. We trusted each other completely. I stopped the car at the house that was once mine and entered through the side door. He knocked and then pushed open the door to the kitchen. I expected Carol to cook dinner, and I was not disappointed. The smell was appetizing, and I realized that I had not eaten normal food for a long time, eating all this time in cheap eateries. Carol was there too and looked great. Her red hair flowed freely to her shoulders, sparkling with that same shine that she somehow managed to impart. Her face was pale, but she tried to apply some blush to add some color to herself. Her lipstick matched her hair, and her green eyes, always one of her best qualities, were now red and tear-stained. The sight of her gave me a small feeling of satisfaction. Looks like I wasn't the only one feeling bad right now. Pete, you've arrived. Please come in. I prepared everything you like. I guess you've been eating at cheap places since you left. I hope you'll at least sit down and eat properly while we're talking. I'd like to eat, and it smells really good, I said, sitting down in my usual place and filling my plate. As I ate greedily at the food, I asked, "Where are Julia and Jimmy?" Julia and Jimmy are our children. Julia is older, she's 9, and Jimmy is 7. Both are red-haired, like their mother, and Jimmy is broad-shouldered, like me. Julia looked more like Carol, but she had my nose. Otherwise, she was a beauty and Jimmy was a pretty boy. I admit, Carol and I made great kids, and they were wonderful. I was grateful to Carol for this because at first I wasn't home much when they were growing up. I was still a patrolman at the time, but I had already earned my detective badge and worked with the district attorney. It took many hours of hard work, but I soon settled into a normal schedule and started bringing home significantly more money. And by the way, I was sure that the children were mine. What I doubted then was said in a fit of anger in order to hurt her the way she hurt me. The children are with my mother. She doesn't mind looking after them for a few hours. I told her I would pick them up before they went to bed. I would like to see them. I think you knew that, right? Yes, Pete. I knew, but I wanted to talk to you first. We can go after them together, you know? All you have to do is stop this nonsense and go home. Just come back, Pete. Please. Tell me why you were with Jeff that day, Carol. Tell me, why were you alone with him, and why did you go up to his room with him? Tell me, Carol, and if you have a good reason that I can believe, I'll come back. I'll come home if you can give me one reason why you went up to another man's room. It was a stupid mistake, Pete. I didn't think clearly then and acted recklessly. He's been stalking me for months now, telling me I'll love it, and that you'll never know so it won't hurt anyone. I gave in, but I never intended to go any further. I would stop and go home before I could cheat on you. I believe it, Pete, and I want you to believe. You should know that I would never cheat on you. I love you and I love our family. I would never risk this. Never. I swear, Peter. I swear to you that I have never cheated on you. I listened, I let her talk, and I wanted more than anything to believe her. But I was a cop, a detective. I heard people lie to me every day, and their lies sounded like the truth. I've heard young, beautiful women with everything ahead of them lie about their boyfriends. I listened to men who had wonderful families lie about the women they dated on the side. Every day I caught call girls and pimps who lied to me no matter what I asked. And most of them were convincing. Most lied so sincerely that deep down I wanted to believe every word. But they were liars. They lied to protect what they had or to avoid punishment for what they had done. They all had reasons to lie, and they did. The more serious the reason, the better the lie. Carol had plenty of reasons to lie. She had me, her marriage, her children, and this house we worked so hard to build. She lied to protect it all, and she seemed sincere. She spoke as if she was telling the truth, and I so wanted to believe her and save our marriage, our home, and our family. I wanted this with all my heart, but I was a cop. I needed proof. I wanted to get it before making a decision. After hours of conversations, questions, and answers that sounded convincing, but in some places contradicted each other, I finally told Carol that I wanted to believe her, but I needed time. Time to think things over and make a decision. She begged me, again remembering the children, using all the methods available to her, but I still said that I needed time. Finally, I stood up, thanked her for dinner, and quickly left the house, heading to the car. My heart was breaking into pieces, and if I had stayed even a minute longer, I would definitely have given in and hugged her. I wanted so badly to just hold her in my arms, love her, and forget about my doubts. I really wanted this, but I couldn't. I drove back to my one-room apartment in a squalid part of town and burst into tears. I was a tough cop, someone who had seen a lot and was prepared for anything. But that night I just sat on a lonely chair in my room and cried. I loved Carol with all my soul. I loved her from the very night I first saw her. And the moment I saw her with that man in the hotel, my soul shattered into pieces. I never understood what it meant to die of a broken heart. Now I understand. Now I finally understand how those women feel who lose a son, husband, or loved one. I understood how a man feels when his wife dies as a result of robbery. I understood the pain of a father who lost his daughter or a husband who lost his wife. Now I understand it. When morning came, I opened my tear-stained eyes and greeted the new day alone. I looked around my one-room apartment and shuddered at what I saw. I needed to make a decision as soon as possible. I had to find out the truth in order to move on. Living like this was a real punishment that I didn't deserve. I needed answers, and if this bastard didn't come to me today, then tomorrow I would go to him myself. And if this happens, he will be very sorry. When I arrived at work, there were 2 messages waiting for me from Carol asking me to call back and 1 message from Jeffrey Trousdale. I threw all 3 in the trash and walked over to Ed to see what he was doing. He came to work early to finish the Willie Jude case, since the district attorney decided to move forward with the prosecution. We were going to be called to court to testify, and we needed to make sure that all the documents were in order. Ed nodded at me, but continued working. I decided to drink coffee while he finished. I brought 2 glasses, placed one in front of him, and sat down on the chair next to his desk. "All ready," he said. "We have an ironclad business, and the documents, as always, are in perfect order. No lawyer can find any flaws in this case. Another solved murder to our credit thanks to our exceptional professionalism and deep understanding of the criminal world." I laughed out loud, glad again to have Ed as my partner. He was the one who helped me cope with difficulties, and now I needed him more than ever. He knew everything about my situation, but kept it to himself unless I asked for advice. He never discussed what I told him with anyone, not even his wife Helen. Ed and Helen were together longer than Carol and I, and they had 3 children, Ed Jr., Tommy, and Alice. Ed Jr. was 12 years old, and the twins Tommy and Alice were 10. He had a wonderful family, almost the same as mine. Before Carol cheated on me. Excellent job with the confession, even if they try to challenge it. Everything was done according to the rules. Let the prosecutor decide for himself if he cannot restrain him. We still caught him in the act. Exactly. Have you heard anything about Trousdale? Rumor has it that yesterday he was not himself. Rumor has it that he wants to talk to someone who can help him, but no one names names. I had a message that he called and asked me to call him back, but this won't happen. Does he think he can deceive me? I'm not as stupid as my wife. Ed just shrugged, and we went back to our work. We had several open cases, and were waiting for some progress to be made on them when the desk sergeant called from downstairs. "Hey, Cross. Then some vile lawyer came to you. I want to get up. What to do with it?" I looked at Ed, considered my options, and made a quick decision. Put him in the detention room. I'll be down soon. He burst into a short laugh and said, "Understood." I hung up and told Ed I had a visitor. He nodded and looked at me expectantly, but I just shook my head. He didn't need to participate any further. From now on, I'll do it myself. I stood up, grabbed my badge and weapon, and walked out, heading downstairs to the first floor where the 16th District Police Station was located. I walked up to the desk sergeant, and he pointed to the left. This meant that the scoundrel was sitting in the smallest of the 3 detention rooms. These were the rooms where we kept uncommunicative witnesses while they sweated. I walked over, opened the door, and stood looking at Jeff Trousdale. He was a tall man, younger than me and well-built. He was already showing a little belly from the rich life, and his suit and tie probably cost more than I made in a month. He was handsome in a dark way, jet black hair, long, shoulder length, and dark brown eyes. Women probably liked this guy. Now his lips were tightly compressed in an expression of dissatisfaction, and his eyes sparkled with anger. I was going to see what I could do with it. I nodded my head, signaling him to follow me, and walked back the way I came. I stopped at the desk and asked the sergeant if I could use one of the interrogation rooms in the back of the building. He looked at his calendar and held up 2 fingers, indicating that I could use interrogation room 2. I walked on, not bothering to check if the bastard was following me. We had a long way to go. It took a couple of minutes to get there. I had to walk through rows of tables where police officers of all ranks sat, stood, or just relaxed before or after their shifts. Their eyes followed Jeff Trousdale as he moved between them. There was no love in their eyes, and he had to see it. I reached the room, opened the door, and let him inside. As he walked by, I sensed his fear. I closed the door behind me and turned the lock. The room had a two-way glass mirror, a microphone, and a camera, but as a cop, I knew how to turn off the electronics. I did this by looking at the mirror and making the sign, private conversation. This was respected. Well, idiot, speak. I wanted him to understand that this was not a friendly conversation. I sat cross-legged, hands resting loosely on my knees. I was calm and had the situation under control. What the hell is going on? I can't take a single step without some cop starting to get to me. Someone is trying to ruin my life, and they are succeeding. I'm ready to sue the city. But then they told me that you are someone worth talking to. I don't want to sue if I don't have to. No one will emerge victorious. You probably want something. Don't you recognize me, idiot? My name is Pete Cross, and you are having sex with my wife, Carol. His face suddenly turned white and his eyes widened. They looked at me as if I had suddenly grown horns, and he feared for his life. However, he really should have felt that way. He began to stutter, his hands flying in front of him as if he was trying to shoo someone away. I just sat and waited. I saw how it slowly dawned on him what kind of shit he had gotten himself into. Oh, damn. Wait a minute, Cross. I don't know what you think, but I can explain everything. It's not what you imagine. Just a misunderstanding. Now my preparation worked. I interviewed murderers, traitors, and thieves in this room and broke them all. This was my territory, not his. Well, Jeff, you're already starting to annoy me. I took a break from my busy work because I thought you wanted to talk, and all you do is say things that make me angry. I think it's better for you to go back to your life and leave everything as it is. I'm sure if you lead an honest life, the police will have no reason to get to the bottom of you. Listen, it's not what you think. Let me explain, please. Explain what? You had sex with my wife, and we both know it. So what is it that I don't understand? Was she the one who pestered you? Isn't it your fault? Were you just in the wrong place at the wrong time? Damn, I heard it all, Jeffy, so save your excuses. You're a nasty lawyer, and you wouldn't know the truth if it hit you between the legs. He sank into a chair, and now looked no longer like a confident lawyer, but like a man sentenced to life. His eyes became glassy, and he looked like he was about to cry. I didn't feel sorry for him and started to get up when he said, "Okay, what do you want to know? I'll tell you everything you want. Just ask. Tell me everything. When did it start? Why did it happen? How often did you meet? And don't lie, because the first lie will fly you out of here, and I will do everything to make sure your life is no better than dog shit. Understood? I will make your life hell on earth. Make sure I get the truth, and nothing but the truth. Otherwise, your miserable life is over." He nodded, straightened up, and began. We were together for about a month. I seduced her a month ago when we completed a successful case we were working on. I told her we should go out for drinks to celebrate. I gave her double doses until she relaxed. I took her to the room I had booked in advance, and we had sex for over an hour. He looked at me with fear, but I kept my face impassive. It was easy, although my stomach was churning and I had difficulty suppressing the onset of nausea. Every word he said cut me like a knife. It was even worse than I imagined. After that, she tried to resist, but I finally persuaded her to repeat it a week later. I admit, I took advantage of what I knew and threatened to tell you. She was scared and finally agreed. We left work early one afternoon and went to the Marriott and spent 3 hours together trying everything I could think of. She's incredibly good in bed, and you're one lucky guy. And you know what? She never said anything bad about you. If I even mentioned you, she exploded like a rocket. She hit me several times when I said something about you or her children. She loves you, man. Look, we were together 3 or 4 times, but it was just sex. She didn't like it after the first time, and I myself was already tired of it all. But damn, she's an amazing woman. There's nothing more to it than just sex, and that's all in the past. She left me, you know. That day was supposed to be the last. Damn, I threatened to tell you, but she insisted it was over. I tried to get her to do it again, but she refused. We returned to our room to check out. I haven't seen her since then. She said it was over, and she didn't want to see me anymore. The next day she called and quit. She didn't even come to get her things. I tried my best not to kill this man. I had a gun, and maybe I could have found a way to make it a justifiable shooting, but I was a cop in every sense of the word. I believed in the law, and I had no choice. I had to let him go. He did not break any laws and was free. I stood up, went to the door, unlocked it, and pointed to the exit. Get out of here and don't get in my sight. I don't promise anything, but I don't make threats either. Just stay away from me. What about persecution? Will it stop? I don't know anything about it, but maybe I'll talk to some people who might know something about it. If I were you, I wouldn't put pressure on you now. This is not the best time for this. He seemed to have heard me because he jumped up and almost ran out of the room. I didn't even look after him. I sat there for what seemed like hours, but in reality only a few minutes passed. I got what I wanted and needed, and it was bad news. Now I knew that Carol had lied to me, and that told me a lot. I slowly stood up, left the room, and walked through the row of uniformed employees to the elevator. My heart was so broken that I decided not to take the stairs, but to take the elevator to go up 3 floors to my desk. You look like you lost your best friend. Bad news. Ed sat at his desk and looked at me. I assumed that the sergeant had told him what was happening. Very bad. Worse than I had hoped. But now I know everything. And they say that knowledge is a great thing. So, you know what? This is complete crap. Knowledge can be a real punch in the face. Hey, buddy, let's take lost time. I'll sort this out with the lieutenant. He disappeared, and a few minutes later he returned and pulled me by the collar. I was ready to push him away, but by the time I stood up, he was already moving towards the elevator. I followed him, although my anger had already begun to cool, as the energy needed to maintain my anger had evaporated with the news I had just learned. Ed and I spent the next 2 hours discussing my next steps and drinking a few beers. I needed alcohol to even think straight. The pain began to really flare up, and I realized that I was standing on the threshold of life without my wife, with whom I had lived for 13 years. The hardest thing about this situation was that we had children. It is possible to live without a wife or husband, although it hurts at first, but without children is a completely different matter. Children are born, and somehow imperceptibly occupy a special place in the heart. My children were my life. Everything I did was for them and their future. I thought I was doing this with my wife, my life partner, but apparently I was wrong. We made a list of things that I had to do. The first was to meet my wife and tell her that I now know everything. Ed advised me to first contact a lawyer to explain the right thing to do, but I couldn't wait. I needed to deal with Carol first and then let things take their course. We broke up, and I decided to immediately confront her with the truth. When I came home that evening, Carol was surprised but seemed happy to see me. I spent some time with the kids, catching up and promising to spend the weekend with them. They asked when I would return home, but I was evasive and told them that I was busy with a major project and needed to be ready to make sure everything went smoothly. They accepted this explanation when I said it was a secret project and they had to swear not to tell anyone. After that, they went to their rooms to finish their homework and work on their computers. Carol and I were left alone. She sat down on the couch next to me with our cups of coffee. I again told her that I had questions about her story and asked her to retell it again so that I could better understand her version of events. She smiled, assuring me that she had nothing to hide, and began to tell a complicated story about Truesdale's long attempts at seduction and her persistent refusal. The day at the hotel was a mistake, but according to her, I arrived just in time to save her and our marriage. She concluded her speech with a triumphant air. She thought she had woven a story that I would have to accept. And if I hadn't talked to Jeff earlier, I might have believed her. She seemed so sincere, so truthful. Her story was so thought out that it looked almost real. But after lying to me for the last month or more, she had good practice. The most painful thing was that she chose to lie. She betrayed me and Jeff and continued to lie to me, both during their affair and now that I knew the truth. This was the most painful thing. The lies hurt the most. Sex was something that could be discussed, and I would try to work through it, But her lies, which only made the betrayal worse, were too much for me. It showed me how little respect she had for me. I had no choice. Now was the moment to put an end to all this. I looked her straight in the eyes and collected myself internally. I had to remain calm, but tell her everything I knew. Taking a deep breath, I began. I talked to your lover today. I was determined to finish this before I lost my cool. She was still my wife, and part of me wanted her to convince me of her fidelity, but I was also a man whose pride had been destroyed and whose self-respect was threatened. Now it was a fact. She had betrayed my trust and robbed me of my self-esteem. Whoever does not understand this, let him study anthropology, human nature. Take a look at the men's emotions and feelings section. Primitive? Yes, but still real. What are you talking about, Pete? I told you that I don't have a lover. I don't understand what you mean. Don't you believe me? Don't you believe that I didn't do this, and that I would never do something like that? Your lover told me that he had sex with you for the first time a month ago, after you celebrated a successful affair with him. He got you drunk, took you to his room, and you had sex with him for over an hour. A week later, you did it again, this time for 3 hours, and you've met a couple more times since then. This is what I know, and I believe his story because he had an incentive to tell me the truth. Carol looked at me as if she was afraid that I would pull out a gun and shoot her. This fear was clear on her face, and I wondered where it came from. Damn, after 13 years, she should have gotten to know me better. But after what she did, I doubted that she even knew me or understood me as much as I thought. I was waiting for her to say something stupid to justify herself. Did he tell you? Did he tell you this? Why did he say that? Why do you believe him? She began to stutter, her face turning white and tense. Her world was falling apart, and she didn't know how to stop it. Because I have friends in the police who saw you two together. They know this scoundrel and don't like him. They deliberately made his life unbearable and made him understand that I could stop this. Finally, he gathered his courage and came to me. Yes, he did. He told the truth. Pete, you have to listen to me. It was a mistake. I made a terrible mistake, and I'm so sorry. I had too much alcohol the first time, and I think he put something on me. I really think so. And I was afraid that he would cause trouble when I refused him a couple of times after that. He threatened to tell you, and I was scared, so I agreed a second time. I didn't want to, and it was terrible. I thought he would leave me alone, but he still needed it. I didn't like it, and every time I did everything possible to stop him. You have to believe me. No, I shouldn't. I don't believe you, and I think you would have continued this if I hadn't caught you. I saw your face that day. It was obvious that you liked it. You enjoyed it and wanted to continue. You held him, your face was turned towards him for a kiss, and you smiled at him. You had already gone up to the room before and had sex at least once that day. So no, I don't believe you. Please, God, what have I done? Pete, please don't reject me. I love you with all my heart. I was wrong, and I'm so sorry. I promise this will never happen again. Never. Please, Pete, tell me you still love me. Tell me, please. Love has nothing to do with it, Carol. Of course I still love you. How can I just stop loving? You are the mother of my children, and I have loved you since the day we met. But I don't trust you anymore, and marriage requires trust. In order to do my job, I have to be away from you and our children, and when that happens, I trust that you will be here to protect what we have. When you're away, you trust me to take care of our home and our children, and I've never betrayed that trust. And you betrayed. I trusted you, Carol, and you betrayed my trust. How can I live with you anymore? Now she was crying non-stop. I hated watching her cry and wanted to go to her and console her. This desire was very strong. I was a man and couldn't stand to see a woman cry, especially the one I loved. But I had to hold on, pull away, and let her cry. She betrayed me, and now I'm left alone. She didn't even understand how painful it was to realize that someone I trusted completely and deeply had betrayed me. Trust was lost, and I felt so damn alone. She did this to me, and I hated her for it. I need time to think about everything. I want you to find a good lawyer to defend yourself. I'm angry at you, and I might try to hurt you, So protect yourself. I'll file for divorce. I won't give reasons. We'll just divide everything equally. You've always paid your share, and I respect that. We will resolve the issue of alimony, but I will never be stingy with my children. Carol stopped crying when I mentioned divorce. She began to shake her head, repeating, "No," over and over again. I ignored her and continued talking. I wanted it to end as soon as possible. I couldn't look at her anymore and had to leave. I stood up, ready to leave, but she also stood up, so abruptly that the chair flew against the wall with a crash. "No, I will fight you every step of the way. I'll hire the best lawyer, and he'll stop you. I won't give up on our marriage. Never. I messed up. I know this, but it didn't mean anything to me. Nothing, damn you, Pete. You know it. You know deep down in your soul that I love you, and you love me, and this is forever. You know it, you're just too mad at me to see it right now. But you will see when you calm down." She moved toward me, arms outstretched, pleading. I stepped aside, keeping my hands in my pockets. I walked around the table, holding him between us. I was too weak to bear it any longer. I just needed to get out and escape. "I know that I deserve your anger, and I know how much it hurts you. I want to die knowing that I caused this to you. I just want to die and never think about what I did again. I want this, but I can't. You and the children are my life, and I won't let you destroy us. We should be together, and that's the truth. No, Pete, I won't let you tear us apart. I almost destroyed everything with my actions, but we are still here. We are still a family, and I understood everything. I'll never do that again. You just have to forgive me, Pete. That's all you need. Just forgive me, and I will prove to you that it was the right decision. Just forgive me and give me another chance. Everyone deserves a second chance. As a police officer, you should know this. I needed to leave. It was tearing me apart. I had already suffered so much from her betrayal, and now she rushed to me, begging for a second chance. I wanted more than anything to give in, to let her back into my life. But he couldn't. I couldn't just forgive her. I was too hurt to do anything other than hit her back, hurt her as much as she had hurt me. She did this to me. I need to go. I will contact you later and tell you who you can contact and who will represent me. I have to go." With these words, I turned sharply and almost ran out of the house. I got into the car and drove, getting away from her as quickly as possible, and from the life on which I had become dependent. It had been almost 2 weeks since my confrontation with Carol, and everything was about to change. I was still in the same single room, but already took steps to return to the house. Carol will stay in the master bedroom on the second floor, and I will take the spare room. It was on the first floor and had its own bathroom and entrance. This was the apartment that used to be called Mother-in-Law. This arrangement arose solely due to monetary constraints. I didn't make much money as a cop, and Carol's job as a paralegal wasn't much better. She earned almost as much as me, but we had a lot of obligations. A house, children, 2 cars, and utilities with food and clothing. I asked my lawyer to contact her lawyer and convey the request. She immediately agreed. She wanted me to come home, and it was in her best interest. I knew what she was thinking, but I didn't really care. I wanted to be closer to my children, and this helped. My lawyer didn't like it, but he eventually agreed as long as I continued to live in separate bedrooms. He concluded that the issue of money would benefit the judge. We were going to court. She kept her promise. She fought me every step of the way. She objected to child support, and although I knew she had found a new job almost immediately, she claimed that she had to quit her job to stay home with the children. She raised other issues, all of which cost me money and time. She was smarter than I suspected, but she was a paralegal. She had access to knowledge that I did not have. But I was stubborn and continued to fight. I relied on the department's legal team to support me without charge. I was with my children every evening and on weekends. I worked as few hours as possible, and Ed encouraged me to be home before they were ready for bed. On the weekends, I would have dinner with them, but every evening during the week, I would go to one of the restaurants I knew. I was losing weight and eating crap, but I was determined to make it on my own. It's funny. It's usually the wife who has the problem of coping on her own. When I was alone in my room in the evenings, Carol would always try to knock on the door and ask if I needed anything. Every evening when I came home, the bed was made and there were fresh towels in the bathroom. Everything I needed was there, neatly laid out for me to find. I understood her strategy and appreciated it, but I didn't let it affect me. When I left for the night, I rarely opened the door, but she continued to make sure I knew she was just on the other side, waiting. It killed me to know that she was there. It was murder, pardon the pun, but I resisted the urge to open the door and drag her inside. When the urge became too hard to resist, I imagined her on her back with the bastard's ass and her legs wrapped around him. This thought worked for a while, but soon faded as her description of their sessions seemed to say that nothing was right. Our lawyers continued to fight, and after a month, we were finally called to court to find out why we could not reach an agreement. I arrived to find her and our lawyers waiting for me. She asked to meet with me before we were forced to let the judge make a decision. My lawyer was in favor, urging me to resolve this matter in a civilized manner rather than force a verdict on me. He said I wouldn't like it if a judge got involved. I agreed out of desperation. We were led into a small windowless room containing one desk and 4 chairs. I walked in, followed by Carol, who stood and looked around. Finally, she sighed and sat down on one of the chairs. I followed his example and took the one opposite her. I looked at her and motioned for her to begin. When are you going to forgive me and help me get our life back on track? You know that this is not what any of us wants. I admit I screwed up, and I promise it will never happen again what I did. I will do whatever you want to make up for it. Just tell me what you want me to do, and I will do it. Do you want to start your own novel? Fine. Ask any questions, and I'll wait until you tell me it's over. Until then, I will remain faithful. She was serious, as far as I could tell. I knew her as well as anyone, and I knew when she was telling me the truth. And before you say anything, she never lied to me because I never asked any questions. I trusted her blindly. It never occurred to me to ask her questions, so she had no reason to lie. I can't forgive you, at least for now. I still see you and him together, and in my nightmares I imagine all sorts of things. Sometimes I wake up and can't go back to sleep because of what I see when I close my eyes. Do you think I'll live with this? Oh God, Pete, nothing of the kind. It's never been like you and I made love. It was just quick, dirty sex, no love and no affection. What you saw in the lobby was what I was trying to convince. He had to end it. I didn't like anything. I just wanted it to end, and this day was the last for both of us. He should have told you I was ending it that day. I knew it was true, but so what? She still cheated on me, and in doing so gave away everything I thought I knew about her. And for what? What did she gain by this? I never asked her about this. Why? Carol, tell me why you did this. Why did you throw away everything we had for a stupid affair with another man? Why? It was stupid and selfish of me. I spent a lot of time with Jeff, and he was a smart, slick operator who always tried to flatter me, tell me how sexy I was and how much he admired me. He talked about my children and how lucky you are to have me, and he didn't hide the fact that he wanted me too. He pursued me, and I began to look forward to his praise and his attempts to seduce me. I had no problem resisting it, but eventually I realized I wanted to see what it was like. He wasn't a threat to you, and he never tried to be. I just thought it would be safe to do it once. It has never meant more to me than this. What about me and the kids? Have you ever wondered what would happen to me if I found out? You were never supposed to find out. Never. It was my secret, and after I found out how guilty I felt, I knew I could never tell you. God, how it gnaws at me, but even so, I did it again. I never know why. I still don't understand why. I should have stopped everything right away and told you. I still ask myself why I didn't do this. I listened, but her words made no sense to me. These were just words that hid the pain of her betrayal. I realized that nothing she said would make me feel any better. I had to learn to either live with it or move on. I stood up and said in as calm a voice as possible, "What can we do to speed up the process? She looked at me, her eyes filling with tears as she considered my words. Nothing. I haven't changed my mind. I don't want this divorce, and I will continue to fight it as long as I can. You'll have to literally throw me out of your life because I won't go away quietly. With these words, she left the room. We were going to court. The judge was unhappy and ruled that our lawyers must sit down and come to an agreement. Otherwise, he himself will take everything into his own hands and make a decision for us. He said we were both fools to force him to interfere. He mentioned our children and asked if we understood what we were doing to them. I listened, but in all my years as a police officer, I had heard judges scold defendants so many times that I learned to ignore it. When he hit the gavel, I stood up and quickly left the courtroom. I went back to work. Ed and I had a new case, a drug deal gone bad. In the morgue, there were 2 dead blacks and 1 dead Spanish. It was a bidding war between 2 rival gangs. At this point, the Spaniards were ahead, 2-1, and the blacks vowed to even the score. Ed and I tried to stop the violence, but it wasn't going well. Tonight, we were to meet with one of the leaders and discuss what could be done. We were sure who was shooting, and we really wanted to catch them, but first we had to stop the violence. Ed and I came up with a plan, and we were both armed to the teeth. The meeting was supposed to take place in an abandoned area, but we knew it like the back of our hands. We parked the car in a strategically convenient place, made sure that we had enough ammunition, and that there was somewhere to hide in case of emergency. We told the dispatcher where we were and asked to keep several patrol cars at the ready. The dispatcher replied that the cars were patrolling the area and would be there upon the first call. We did everything we could, and now all we could do was wait for Booker to show up. He was the big shot who could stop the showdown if he wanted. From the very beginning, the meeting did not go as planned. First, 3 Spaniards appeared, looking around as if not understanding what was happening. We were in neutral territory, so they weren't in any danger from the other gangs, but we weren't expecting them, and it looked bad for Ed and me. The Booker we agreed with never showed up. Now we find ourselves in an unpleasant situation. Ed and I pulled out our guns, looking at 3 angry and armed men who clearly thought we were trying to set them up. We had no idea what they were talking about, but gradually we began to realize that we were the ones who had fallen into a trap. We tried to get out of this situation with words, but someone somewhere started shooting, and then everything went to hell. I remember Ed screaming, me calling for backup to say that gunfire had started, and Ed and I returning the fire. We were trying to retreat to the car for cover when I felt a blow to my chest. Then everything suddenly became quiet. I saw Ed look at me in surprise, fire a few more shots, and then start talking to me, but I didn't hear a sound. I realized that I had been shot, and I thought that Carol would be happy, because now our divorce would not be a problem, since I would die. At that moment, I realized that I would miss her. I loved her with all my heart, and a wave of sadness washed over me, causing my eyes to fill with tears and my heart to clench. I regretted that I didn't try to improve the relationship, that I didn't try to forgive her, but now it was too late. I was afraid that because I refused to forgive her, I would go to hell. This last thought shocked me. That was the last thing I remembered. I suddenly woke up in a panic. I looked around wildly, trying to figure out if the shooting was still going on and if we were in danger. I knew that I could not hear the shots, but I knew that they must still be heard. I tried to get up, but it didn't work, and then someone put a hand on my shoulders and made me lie down again. I didn't have the strength to resist, and I just sank back. I was surprised when I felt something soft underneath me instead of hard concrete. I closed my eyes, closed them as we were taught in the academy, and then opened them again. Carol's eyes were in front of me. She stood over me, looking down, and her eyes were shining with tears. I closed my eyes again and opened them several times, trying to comprehend what was happening. Why is she here, in the middle of a firefight? After all, they could kill her. I tried to tell her this, but my mouth wouldn't listen, and instead of words, I only got some unintelligible sounds. And then it dawned on me. I can hear. And I noticed that there were no sounds of gunfire, screams, or sirens. Nothing like it should have been. I closed my eyes again and tried to think. Pete, open your eyes. It's me and you're okay. You're in the hospital. You were shot and were unconscious for a long time. It's okay, Peter. Open your eyes. I heard these words, and they answered some questions that were spinning in my head. Why did the shooting stop? Why were there no sirens and screams? It turned out that I had been shot and taken to the hospital. And the most amazing thing is that I was alive. I opened my eyes and saw Carol looking at me. When my eyes finally remained open, she stepped back with a smile on her face. She seemed happy that I had come to my senses. Then she turned and called the nurse. I just watched as she walked out into the hallway, holding onto the door frame and motioned for someone. I managed to get a good look at her. She was wearing a dull sweater over a threadbare house dress. It seemed so out of place for her that even in my state of great confusion, I noticed it. After this, I was still confused for some time. Doctors and nurses were fussing around me, doing something to me and to the devices. I didn't feel any pain when I was injured, but there was nothing to celebrate. My head was foggy, my stomach was very upset, my muscles did not want to obey, and overall I felt very sluggish. I just wanted to fall asleep and not wake up for a whole week, or even longer, just so that my body could become mine again. I closed my eyes and fell back to sleep. The next 2 days were strange for me. When I woke up later that day, the nurse was disconnecting me from my support systems. I had to sit down, lie down again, stand up again several times as if I were a puppet. But the best part was that I felt almost no pain in my chest where the bullet entered. The doctor who came in towards the end of the day said that they managed to get the bullet out and stitch me up, which was lucky as it was very close to the heart. If it had not been removed, it would have moved over time and killed me. I was unconscious for almost 48 hours. He said that my condition had improved to satisfactory, and if nothing changed, I would be discharged in a few days. Ed came to see me along with several friends from the department. Over the next 2 days, I had many visitors, colleagues in uniform, old friends with whom Ed and I had worked before. Their visits really helped, and I felt better. Good friends make recovery easier and faster. I also saw my children, Julie and Jimmy, when Carol and Ed sneaked them in to see me. They were too young to visit the hospital according to the rules, but thanks to our position in the police force, we were allowed to make exceptions. I think the hospital has seen too many of our wounds and injuries not to accommodate us halfway. I spent almost 10 minutes with Julie and Jimmy, and it was the highlight of the day. I needed them more than anyone could have imagined. Carol was acting differently, and I couldn't figure out what was wrong. Since I woke up, neither she nor I have mentioned her cheating. She tried her best to be the perfect wife, caring, always asking if I needed anything, telling me how much she loved me, and how much she was waiting for me to get better so I could come home. But at the same time, she avoided meeting my gaze and often turned away. She was clearly tense, and when the pain or discomfort became unbearable, I would sometimes swear or growl, which would cause her to cower and turn away. This made me angry. It was more angry than words or apologies. The only time I mentioned anything about her cheating was when I said that I needed to find a place where I would live after being discharged. Carol's face turned white, her breathing became ragged and heavy, but she didn't say anything. She looked at me for a moment, her lips trembling as if she wanted to say something, but then she turned away again. Instead of answering, she said that she would try to bring the children to me again if she could, and I immediately changed the subject by asking how she planned to arrange this. The moment was forgotten, and we continued to live in our strange coexistence. Ed and Carol seemed to be getting along as usual. This surprised me because Ed knew what Carol had done, and he was always devoted to me, just as I was to him. I watched them, and they seemed to communicate the same way as before. Carol was always friends with Ed's wife, and Ed always liked my wife. But it still seemed strange to me. I decided to talk to Ed about this when we were alone. Such an opportunity presented itself only the next day, shortly before my discharge. Ed was sitting next to me discussing our case when I raised the question. It looks like Booker set us up back then, partner. He said that he had received information that we were going to detain him and charge him with the murder of those guys. He didn't say how he knew this, but now he realizes it was nonsense. Of course, he didn't apologize, as you understand, but I saw in his eyes that he was going to get even. You know, partner, I canceled the operation. I don't care anymore, and I'm not going to stop them anymore. Let them shoot each other, I don't care. We've already given up too much trying to prevent this massacre. I nodded, agreeing with him, although deep down it was eating away at me. But sometimes you need to turn away and let things take their course. Too many people will get hurt if we try to stop what seems inevitable. I nodded, agreeing with him. I don't see any other way out, Ed. I agree with you. Let them do what they want, and we'll sort it out later. Ed, what's between you and Carol? I would expect more loyalty from you, knowing what she did. I don't expect you to hate her, but you two seem to get along fine. Ed looked at me for a few moments, clearly thinking about what to say. I've seen that look before when we were interrogating a suspect. Ed always chose his words carefully and knew how to keep the situation under control. I waited for his answer, knowing that he would not lie. Pete, I need to tell you something. You are my partner, and I love you. You know this, and you know what I mean. So listen. I was the one who told Carol that you had been shot and that your condition was serious. Pete, she collapsed like she was knocked down. She passed out, man. I literally picked her up and laid her on the sofa. She was in complete shock. I called an ambulance and sat with her until they arrived. I called Helen, and she came to pick up the children when they returned from school. The ambulance gave Carol a sedative because she simply could not come to her senses. Pete, she was broken. I hope I never see this condition in anyone again. It made me really think about what we were doing. In short, I realized that you are her life, Pete. We've both seen people who say they love you, but the way Carol responded to your condition showed me that she truly loves you. I realized that the thought of your death literally destroyed her. Any woman who loves her man that much can't be that bad. You have to understand that Carol is beside herself right now, knowing that she screwed up and almost lost you twice. First to a divorce and then to a bullet. And I don't know what was worse for her. She talked to Helen a lot, and Helen forgave her. I see how much she cares about you, and I'll be honest. She has my approval. What you do is up to you, but believe me, whatever caused her mistake, it's definitely not a lack of love for you. Oh yes, one more thing. This nasty lawyer complained to the city council that he was being harassed by cops, but his complaints fell on deaf ears. Partners in his law firm suggested that he resign and consider moving to another state. Last I heard, he was seriously considering this option. He was once hinted that a bag of illegal drugs, accidentally found in his car when stopped for a violation, could disappear if he acted reasonably. Pete, you have many friends in this city, and there is a woman who loves you more than life itself. Think about it. I looked after him, and thoughts rushed through my head like a whirlwind. I was due to be discharged tomorrow, and I had to make a decision about where I was going to go. I lived in the guest room in the house the entire time, and it was still the smartest option. But I wanted to make sure I was making the right decision. I decided to talk to Carol when she returned. Carol came in shortly after Ed left and sat down next to the bed. She was silent, and I looked at her carefully. A trace of tension was visible on her face. She clearly did not sleep well. Perhaps it was anxiety about me, or maybe anxiety about the upcoming divorce. I wasn't sure of anything anymore. This was one of the side effects of cheating, loss of trust and confidence. Carol, do you know that I'm being discharged tomorrow? She looked up and met my gaze for the first time in a long time. I know. What do you want to do? What do you want me to do? She took my hand, looked at it, and then said, I want you to come home to where you belong. To our home, yours and mine, so that I can take care of you, and the children can see that you are back, and that everything will be fine with us. This is exactly what I wanted. I remembered my last thought before I was shot. The last thing I remembered was regretting that we had not tried to improve our relationship, and that I had not tried to forgive her. I also remembered the pain I felt knowing that I could lose them all. Maybe this injury was a kind of awakening, a warning to me that I could lose everything at any moment, and I didn't want to die alone. My father once told me something when I was angry at a friend who had let me down. He said, "Do you want to be angry or happy? You can't be both." He was right, more than I could understand at the time. Carol deserved a chance to explain herself. She deserved a second chance. I had no right to be judge and executioner because we were together in this marriage. We had children and a common house. I was not alone, and I did not have the right to make a decision that would affect everyone but suit only me. She broke our agreement when she cheated, but we both made a vow, for better or worse. I could not take advantage of one part of this promise while ignoring the other. Okay, let's go home. Let's try to figure it out and get through this. I'm ready to try. Her look, full of love and devotion, convinced me that we had a chance. A real chance to stay together as a family. I returned home and fully recovered from my injury. Within 4 weeks, I was back to working at a desk, and within 6 months, I was back to full-time duties. Ed and I solved many more cases, and I received the rank of lieutenant. Ed became a detective first class, but stopped there. It was his decision. I later received a promotion to captain and my own unit. Life went on as usual. I missed field work, but it was much safer. Carol was thrilled when I got the promotion and the desk job, and I could see why. I was reminded of the cold and pain in my chest outside on cool days. Carol and I were able to repair our relationship and became a couple again. Her new job was more intense, but also more transparent. She always informed me where she was and never stayed late without calling and explaining. She introduced me to all her colleagues and made sure I knew who was who. She said I could call her any time for any reason, and she would always answer. She did everything she could to get me to trust her again, and over time I actually started to do so. We made love for the first time 3 months after I returned home. It took longer than I expected because I was still struggling with the visions that flashed into my head at unexpected moments. Before we did this, I asked Carol to tell me everything that happened between her and Jeff. She didn't like it, but she told me, and I admit, it wasn't as bad as what I had imagined. I had nightmares. Some are about the shooting, and some are about Carol and her lover. I can't say which ones were worse. Carol seemed to be able to discern what exactly the nightmare was about and tried to be especially caring at such times. It helped. I think her suggestion to try something new in bed also played a role. She said that in what we try, I will be her first. This pleased my ego. We are back almost to what we were before her betrayal. The kids grew up, went to high school, then to college, and we stayed together. The children got married, we had grandchildren, and we were still together. We were husband and wife. We loved each other and cared for each other. But here's the important thing. We were never able to return to the same level. I always had a little doubt in the back of my mind every time she was late or came back later than she promised. I watched her when we were at friends' parties or barbecues. I wondered who was calling her when the phone rang and she answered. Sometimes I would just sneak glances at her when she didn't know I was looking. I was nervous when she said she was going out with friends, and I always stayed awake until she returned. In the first months, it was especially difficult, but over time it became easier. Did she cheat on me again? No, I knew it, and I knew she would never do it again. She once told me that the worst thing about cheating is not getting caught, not paying the price for it, and not losing trust. She said these things could be returned over time, and I could learn to trust her again. But the worst thing for her was to see the pain in my eyes when I found out about her betrayal. She said it haunted her. She still woke up at night when she least expected it, and everything would appear before her eyes again. And she said that she still saw the occasional glimmer of doubt in my eyes, even now, years later. And she said that the pain she experienced in these moments was worse than anything she had ever felt. Worse than the pain of childbirth. So we both paid for her mistakes. Are we happy together? Yes, we are happy and where we want to be with each other. But could it have been better? Yes, if she hadn't cheated, everything could have been better. I still feel angry sometimes that I lost it, but I promised in joy and in sorrow. The consequences are truly disgusting. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think, click to the next one.